Who do I have to become to experience a breakthrough? I believe that we have to become creators who intend to create the future. Why? Research says that within the next decade, 250 million knowledge worker jobs will be eliminated due to automation. But I believe it's the greatest period and greatest moment in history for creators to understand what is my calling, what is the thing that I'm going to commit to, and what is that connection. So when I talk about this whole thing of your calling, a number of years ago, Mom and Dad enrolled me into McKinley Vocational High School in Buffalo, New York, where I grew up. And at McKinley High School, you had to take air conditioning and refrigeration, plumbing, carpentry, and sheet metal. And I failed all the classes. And as if I didn't have sense enough, I went out for the football team and I got cut. I went out for the basketball team and they said, "You are not the next Magic Johnson." I went out for track and field and they said, "You are a little slow, you need to do cross country." And I think the coaches felt sorry for me and I felt sorry for me. So my parents transferred me over to Bennett High School, and it was at Bennett High School in Buffalo, New York, where I met Miss Rita Lankus, who was my English teacher, and she said to me, "Young man, I want you to write a speech and give it before the entire school." And I said, "Okay." And what I recognized is that Miss Lankus became a critical piece to the puzzle of my life because she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. I believe that when it's time for you to step into your calling, you will discover that there are people that come in your life and people that come through your life, and they are carrying a piece of information that will cause you to go to another dimension. My mentor said to me a number of years ago, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Mark Sharona, he said to me, "You weren't born to fit in, you were born to be brilliant." And the moment he said it, it unlocked something in me, because what I began to recognize is that when I was at McKinley High School, I was chasing after something that was not a part of my calling. And I believe, ladies and gentlemen, when you are a creator, you will discover the thing that you want wants you. You would never have a desire for something unless you already had the capacity to make it happen. So when it comes to really understanding your calling, the question becomes, are there some things that we have to let go of? So I want everybody to do me a huge favor. Everybody hold up your arm where your watch is. Hold up your arm where your watch your piece of jewelry. And would you be so kind to take your watch or piece of jewelry off and put it on the opposite wrist? Watch or piece of jewelry, put it on the opposite wrist. And if you don't have a watch or piece of jewelry, borrow something from your neighbor and tell him I'll give it to you the next time I see you. You might find your stuff on eBay, all right? So here's the question. How does it feel having the watch or piece of jewelry on the opposite wrist? How does it feel? Strange, weird, awkward? Let me ask y'all a question. What time is it? All right. Now, that's a trick question. The most popular question at Disney is, what time is the 3 o'clock parade? That'll hit some of you later on. I know we're moving quick. Here's what I've discovered. The reason sometimes people never find their calling is because they have emotional equity in the way they've always done it. And all of a sudden, when it's time to let go of what they've been doing, they're like, wait a minute. But I'm going to invite you for the remainder of the day to leave the watch on the opposite wrist to serve as a reminder that if I intend to experience brilliant living, what is it that I intend to do? And I believe as a creator, once you tap into your calling, then you must say, what is that commitment that I'm going to make? A number of years ago, when I went to work for one of the greatest organizations on the face of the earth, that being the Walt Disney World Resort, one of the joys at Disney back in the day is you receive an inner office yellow envelope with the string around it. That's old school. Some of y'all don't remember that. And there would be an invitation inside, and the invitation was to have breakfast with the president. So sure enough, inner office mail came, and I got my invitation, and it said arrive at Disney Shot and Beach Club Resort at 7:30 a.m. on a certain day. Well, Being the eager beaver that I was at that time, I decided to get there at 6:45 a.m., and I have a confession. I did something that I am not proud of. When I walked into that room, I noticed that there were name cards on the table where everybody was supposed to be sitting, and I noticed that my name card wasn't next to the president. So, nobody's in the room. What would you do if you were in my shoes? I decided to do a little switcheroo. So, sure enough, 7:30 comes. I'm sitting next to the most powerful man, the president of Disney at the time. And at Disney, you're on a first-name basis. And so he said to me, "Hi, Simon." I said, "Hi, Al." I said, "May I ask you a question?" He said, "Sure." I said, "What do I have to do to get ahead here at Disney?" And here's what he said. He said, "You need to know who you are, and you need to know why you're here." And when he said it, it just went right over my head. I said, "Seriously, dude, really?" I didn't say this. I just gave him the screensaver face. But it didn't hit me till almost a decade later what he was really saying. He was inviting me to think about making an emotional commitment instead of a rational commitment to why I was there working. And what I began to understand is that a rational commitment is that a creator will do what they do because they have to. But an emotional commitment is you do what you do because you want to. And I believe when you have the want to, as a creator, you will get a chance to, and you will discover how to, because when you make that emotional commitment, you become an emotionologist. An emotionologist understands that whenever they walk into a room, that they are not in the room is in them. And when you understand how to be an emotionologist, you recognize that the brand or the business that you represent is not the product or service. A brand is an emotion, a connection, a perception, a moment, and a memory. So when you show up, people begin to see the emotional commitment because, according to Gallup, 70% of human decision making is emotional, 30% rational. And when people emotionally commit to a brand, they spend more, pay a higher margin, and tell others about it. So my question for you, oh brilliant one, you do know that you're sitting next to oh brilliant one, right? Just look at your neighbor and say, "Hello, oh brilliant one." Somebody said, "I'm glad you finally recognize." You may be slow, but you're worth waiting on. So here's what I want you to think about. Where do we as creators need to make an emotional commitment? I want to invite you to write these numbers down. Write these numbers down. Please, ma'am, please, sir, write down 15, 7, 30, 90. 15-7-30-90. And if you play these numbers in the lottery and they hit, don't forget about your new best friend. Okay, so I believe one of the most powerful things that we can do in making that emotional commitment is to start with getting up 15 minutes early. Carving out 15 minutes a day. Now, why do I say that? There are 24 hours in a day. Average person sleeps for 8 hours, works 8 hours, so 24 minus 16 is 8. If we say that you need another 4 hours to commute, get ready for the day, spend time with loved ones, your baby or your boo, that means you're left with about 4 hours. So I believe we can find 15 minutes. But I want to invite us to think about how do we take the 15 minutes and chunk it down into 3 5-minute segments. The first 5 minutes, I want to invite us to think about how do we begin to just meditate. Just get quiet. Because sometimes in making an emotional commitment, we discover that there is a difference between being busy and being effective. So the second 5 minutes is to read or listen to something that inspires you. If you went to dictionary.com and typed in the word inspire or inspiration, one of the entries that would pop up would say to breathe life into. So you cannot give what you have not received, you cannot do what's not been done, and you cannot be who you've not become. So that second 5 minutes to read or listen to something that inspires you is to infuse you so you have something to give. Third 5 minutes, stretch and get aligned with the day. Rabbi Harold Kushner teaches an amazing concept called emotional congruence. Rabbi says when you're operating in emotional congruence, everything that you think, everything that you say, and everything that you feel is in full alignment. When you are in full alignment, you have internal integration for external execution. But it starts with 15 minutes a day. Now, here's how the formula works. 15 minutes a day creates 7 days a week. 7 days a week creates 30 days. 30 days creates 90 days. So net takeaway, if I am to be a creator who experiences a breakthrough, live my life in quarters. Every 90 days, how did I get to this point? Well, it's because of the behaviors and habits that I've had for the last 30, 60, 90. How did I get to this point? Based on what I've done for the last 7 days. How did I get to this point? Based on what I've done 15 minutes a day. I believe when we make that emotional commitment, we will discover that not only will we slow down in order to speed up, but as a creator, we'll discover that a paycheck is given to people who show up. But opportunities are given to people who work beyond what they're paid to do because of that emotional commitment. Now, after we think about our calling and we've made the emotional commitment, we then have to say, what is that connection? A few years ago, I was invited to South Africa to speak at an event, and I went to a dinner that night that was being given by the host, and had individuals sitting on both sides of me. And the young man to the right of me, we started talking, and I said, "What do you do?" And he said, and he looked at me, he said, "I'm a slashie." And I said, "What's a slashie?" He said, "I'm a digital photographer slash, I'm a fashion designer slash, I'm a computer programmer slash." I said, "A slashie." I said, "I came all the way to South Africa to get free." So I said, "Walk me through this," because I have always heard you have to stay in this box. You have to do it this way. You can't step out of that. And he said, all of these things tied to my core skills, so I've tied them all together, and I call myself a slashie. And then all of a sudden it hit me, because I remember growing up at a time when people said, "What's your title on your business card?" And you would stick your chest out and say, "Watch me roar," whatever. And we are living in a time and an era where people are waking up on the planet where they settled 30 years ago for a check, a cup of coffee in Cubicle Farm, and woke up and said, "This doesn't work for me anymore. I have brilliance in me." And then they discovered, here's what they discovered: what you do is not who you are. Because who you are is just a snapshot of what you do. So when you begin to make that connection, you begin to recognize that I am absolutely, positively brilliant. And the universe will invite us to a moment where we have to let go of what has been comfortable and convenient to let emerge what wants to come. That's the breakthrough. So allow me to upload into your hard drive a few thoughts. When I understand the power of connection, I recognize that the real job of a leader is never to motivate anyone. The job of a leader is to invite people on a journey to discover themselves while they're following you. That's the job of a leader. When I understand connection, I recognize that success is inconvenient. Because if it was convenient, everyone would be successful. So to the degree that you are willing to be inconvenienced, oh brilliant one, is the level you will tap into your calling, your commitment, and your connection. Here's something else to consider. In life, there are only two things we do. We enter through birth and exit through death. What you do from the entrance to the exit determines what you do with your life. So when we consider all of this, it reminds me of a time when I received a call from my mom, and she said, "We need you to come home to Buffalo, New York right away." And I got on the plane, flew up to Buffalo, walked into the hospital room, and they said, "We only give your dad a few hours to a few days to live." And it was like the punch in the gut, because I'd always wanted to hear my dad say that I love you. And my dad had never said it. And everything that I had been doing was to get my father's approval and validation that I was okay. And I'll never forget my father, who was a migrant worker from Jamaica 50 years ago. He picked oranges in Mount Dora, Florida, migrated up to Perry, New York, where he picked apples. When I got ready to tell him that I was going to leave Disney to go out on my own, he said, "We don't have much to give you, son, but we want to let you know that your mother and I, we are with you, and we are going to support you as much as we possibly can." So there he was, laid out, and my mom says, Reginald, Simon's here." And my father wakes up out of this coma-like state, and he says to me for the first time, "I love you, and I believe in you, and whatever you do, put God first." And he closed his eyes, and a few days later, he was gone. At the celebration of his life, a few weeks later, a Caucasian woman came up to me, and she said to me, "Your dad was my brother." I said, "Really?" You know, all kind of stuff come out at funerals, you know. Funerals become the great reveal. Did you know? You didn't know? Let me tell you. And her husband was standing right next to her, and her husband said, "Yes, your dad was her brother." And what I found out is that my mom and dad used to volunteer at a food pantry for homeless people in Buffalo, New York, that her and her husband ran. And her and my father would talk and solve all the problems in the world. And what I really believe that she was saying that was such a connection and so powerful to me in that moment is that love and respect have no color. Because when I understand that love and respect have no color, everyone has a piece of the puzzle. I have what you need, and you have what I need, and when we come together, we become better together. In other words, we have to move from me to we. And when we move from me to we, then we really, really begin to understand that brilliant living is all about your calling, your commitment, your connection. So, my friends, I want to let you know, on behalf of my father, who is in heaven, my mother still living, I don't know when I will see you again, but I want to let you know I love you, I believe in you, and there is not a darn thing you can do about it. Thank you very much.